We're going. Hey, this is Matt Mulholland and Matt Danskin. And this is the Listen to This Bull live show, the show where we get to tell you all the things that we want to say, and you get to ask questions and hope that we answer your questions. Actually, it sounded like such a dick way to start a show. We're going to talk about a topic, but if you have questions about that topic, bullshit in the insurance world is what we're looking for, but you can ask us questions about anything. You know, how many
Absolutely.
T's is the appropriate amount of T's for a map? I don't know. You could ask that and we'll figure it out. So I'm going to play this thing that tells you what show you're watching. And I had a guy recently tell me that he was very happy about the content that I produced, that it taught him a whole bunch, but that I needed to stop talking about beer and other frivolous things because nobody's got time for that shit. But thank you for doing what you do.
Well, I'm making time for that stuff.
So I'm drinking you can't even see it.
It's a green beer?
Green. Tank 7. I've had a few of these because there's a guy that works at Coastal downstairs from us, one of our business partners at NCI, and he brings these up to me. It's a Saison. I never liked Saisons that much. This one's amazing. It's a Tank 7 from Boulevard Brewing. What are you drinking?
I've got another. It's kind of a micro brew, you could say. Very, very niche. You probably haven't heard of it. It's
that's unique.
Golden, Colorado.
Yeah. Silver Bullet. Is that that's a Silver Bullet? Or is that Miller?
No, it's Silver Bullet's Coors Light.
No, Tap the Rockies. They have too many sayings for that one. All right, so today we're going to be talking about who is supposed to write the estimates in an insurance claim. And I had you on here because you sent me a few things over the last couple of days talking about that very issue.
Yeah.
So you are what's your role? Tell me a little bit about you real quick for the audience.
So I do a handful of different things. It seems like I've got like multiple jobs. So I am the founder of Restoration Referral System. I teach contractors how to create referral relationships with insurance agents. That's kind of the primary main thing that I do. We've created a marketing automation software called boomsystem.io. That's kind of the second thing that I do. I also do building consulting, going out and doing inspections and doing basically half of a PA's job and letting them battle it out with the insurance agent or insurance adjuster after they've got my documentation. Must be a PA.
Frederick over here thinks you must be a PA if you're doing that many jobs all at once.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
And then I'm also president of the Catalyst Group.
Well, that's pretty strong.
Yeah.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. Father of 4 also.
Yeah, that's just the last thing that you say is, and I do this other thing on the side. This tiny thing here. So you feel like you might have a little bit of authority or at least know what you're talking about when it comes to who you think should write an estimate in an insurance claim.
I mean, I think I've got my opinions. Ultimately, that's all it is. I mean, that's what everybody's got. I think you've probably got more of a leg to stand on in terms because you're a licensed PA. All those things that I'm doing are just me.
So who do you think? If I'm a contractor or a public adjuster, which one should write the estimate?
I think that the person who is going to do the work should write the estimate over the person who is going to pay the bill. I think if you're talking about PAs, you're bringing in kind of that other element to it. I think the PA can write that estimate, but they should do so in collaboration with that contractor who's actually going to do the work.
I'm with you here. I'm curious what my audience thinks, though, because this is one of those topics that tends to have a little bit of controversy. You know, there's been plenty of claims over the years as a public adjuster where the contractor has wondered why they're having to write the contract or the estimate or something along those lines with my claim. What am I paying you for? Might be the commentary that we get. You know, you're supposed to be doing everything for us so that we don't have to do anything. But they're the ones that's performing the work. Can I, as an adjuster, I mean, forget about the fact I'm a public adjuster. That doesn't matter. An adjuster, does an adjuster have the credentials to write a legitimate estimate? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, individuals might. I've got a background in roofing. I might be able to write a roof estimate. I might be able to take some classes and learn how to write an estimate appropriately. I could take Xactimate courses. I could get certified as Xactimate. That doesn't mean I know how the construction actually works.
Well, even to that point, even the guy who's going to do the work, who's done it a million times, who is an absolute legend at construction and everything that goes into it, and even estimating for those things, there are going to be things that they don't see that end up coming up that they miss, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the further you get away from that, the more things they're going to be that maybe could have been on that initial estimate that end up getting missed because of their lack of knowledge. Or on the flip side of it, there are going to be things that are added on there that really aren't necessary, but the guy doing it would know better. So
the Pain of the Claim podcast is something I just got done recording with Remedy Claims, and they just posted on this one. PA should really help put it in a format that the carrier understands. I like that idea. You know, an adjuster might know how the policy applies to an estimate, or might know that there's additional coverages that the contractor might not be associated with. I mean, if you're a roofer and you're writing an estimate for a roof job, are you going to write an estimate for ALE? Are you going to write anything for the personal property? Probably not. A public adjuster might need to get involved in that. Now, how's it going, Javier? This is Neck Tattoo. I wish he would just change his name in Facebook to just Neck Tattoo so I'd stop being so confused. They could write an estimate for, but what weight does it hold? That's a good question.
Who is they in his comment there?
I would assume he's talking about adjusters. The adjusters can write an estimate, but what weight does it hold? But that's a good question. It could be contractors. What weight does that hold? You know what? Glad you asked it like that. So if a public adjuster writes an estimate, they're not a bona fide contractor necessarily. I'm using that word bona fide because it's actually written into many statutes. So in the most statutes, especially when it talks about auto policies, a carrier can request an estimate be written by a bona fide repair shop for auto, for body work or something like that. Bona fide just means that they're licensed, they're insured, they're able to perform that work. So a bona fide contractor would be someone that is capable of actually performing that particular set of work in that state. The license in that state could actually, if the policyholder decided to use that one, could actually do it. So if a public adjuster wrote an estimate, would it hold any weight at all? They're not a bona fide contractor, so does it mean anything? I don't think so. I don't think it does.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that it doesn't mean anything, but I would say that the buck doesn't stop there.
You know, an adjuster back in the day, 20 years ago, before the contingency contract crap that we're probably going to get into in this particular episode. But before all that, if an adjuster ever wrote an estimate, it was mostly because there wasn't a contractor involved. If there was a contractor already there, they'd ask for a copy of the estimate. If there wasn't, they might still not write an estimate. They might ask the policyholder to get 3 estimates. We've all heard that before. Get 3 estimates. And the reason they're doing that is so that they can justify how much their estimate is for. And if they ever wrote an estimate, it would really be used to set a reserve. And a reserve is simply just an amount of money that they put to the side. This is how much money the carrier may end up having to pay out on this particular claim. If they have that reserve set at a certain amount, it's based off of what that adjuster observes on site. If there's a contractor that's already involved and they've already got an estimate, then there's no reason to create your own estimate as an adjuster.
Yeah.
The question becomes, do you think that the amount that they are presenting is reasonable? And if not, then there's remedies in the policy for that. There's appraisal. So as an adjuster 20 years ago, an IA, you'd never have to write an estimate if there was a contractor there. You just get that contractor's estimate. Now, in modern times with contingency contractor contracts, who gets to set the price? If the contingency contract says we'll do the work for the amount the insurance company approves, I feel like the contractor is giving the right to the insurance carrier to write the estimate. So an adjuster is then given the ability to write the estimate, and now it holds weight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think the reason I sent you that post from this morning, and I've got it pulled up here just for anybody that's wondering, maybe missed it. This guy said, why has it become the norm for contractors to write estimates for the insurance companies? Am I the only one who is tired of doing the job for the adjuster and not being compensated? And I get where he's coming from. But like my experience has been, I've done it both ways. Like I've been the guy that goes up and, is working with the customer, says, hey, they'll give us their estimate and then we'll supplement that. And there we go. But I've also, as I learn more, realized like their estimate is going to suck 99% of the time, right? Like it is intentionally bad because it's going to save them money whenever they're not held accountable. And so when I realized that, it was like, all right, writing an estimate for the type of work that I do all day, every day is not that hard. There's automated programs that can do 90% of it for you in Xactimate. And, it's not that hard for typical claims, especially, typical residential roof, gutter, siding, window claims. It's not hard. And so if you can do that, like regardless of whose responsibility it actually is, you're going to make more money. You're going to get closer to your number than to their number more often.
That's true. So, so it's assurance adjuster that writes an estimate. They have to write an estimate within their guidelines. The carrier writes a set of rules that they have to abide by in order to keep their jobs. If they're writing an estimate using those guidelines, this is how they would write it. And they're going to limit how they write the estimate based on those guidelines. And so those guidelines might keep them from being able to write for ridge cap and starter, or they might be able to only write for category 2 or category 1 water, but not category 3 or something along those lines, whatever that might be. If there's a contingency contract involved that allows the carrier to set the price, then using their estimatics almost makes a little bit of sense. But if there is a legitimate contractor writing an estimate, those estimatics only mean that they can't write the estimate to include that themselves. It doesn't mean that they can't approve those things. There's a very different thing between being allowed to write an estimate for that and being allowed to approve those types of items. So if a legitimate contractor writes an estimate with those items, a lot of times, if it's not a contingency contract, they just approve it. If it is a contingency, they're still going to fight it because you've given the right to the carrier to write those estimates. So if you get outside of the carrier's estimatics by writing a legitimate contract that the insured actually agrees to, then you bypass a lot of the issues. But if you're a contractor that thinks that the adjuster should be writing the estimate and that's their job and that you should get paid for doing their job, I want you to turn that around. You're a contractor. If you were not dealing with an insurance claim, would you have to write an estimate? Yes. Does the adjuster ever have to write an estimate if there isn't a contractor involved? Yes. But does he have to write an estimate if there is a contractor involved? No. Maybe he's doing your job for you and should charge you. I want to see some invoices go from the carrier to the contractor. That'd be pretty funny.
Hey, I'm going to approve your price, but here's a bill for $500 for having to do part of your job.
Yeah, since you're allowed us to set the price. Scott says, I know too many PAs that don't know much about construction and therefore don't have knowledge base to write a proper estimate. That's very true. I've written estimates before because the contractor didn't or wasn't willing to or something along those lines because they thought that I was supposed to be the one writing it. I'm not some kind of a estimate guru. I have a general idea of construction. I can do things with a roof better than anything else because that's where my construction background came from. But I don't know how to rebuild a house. I can build a okay estimate because I don't know all the things that are involved. But if a legitimate contractor were to write an actual estimate, I'm sure it would be a lot better than what I would do. Why wouldn't I want a legitimate contractor to do so? Emily says Cody Houseman. I think she's trying to tag somebody.
I think she's just
Unless
tagging
that is
this
codes.
thing.
Is that a code for something?
Yeah. Code house man.
Code house man. He was talking about
Adjusters. Oh, that was, yeah.
Yeah, that was like that too. Too many carrier adjusters either lack the knowledge or are under carrier guidelines, and therefore their scope of work lacks usually substantially. Wow, that's hard to say really fast. It works, but it's hard to say. Plus, keep in mind what estimates is defined as a guess, basically. That's true. So an estimate is a guess. You're speculating how much the cost of the work would be. So what's the opposite of an estimate? Once it's actually incurred, what do they call that?
A bid.
Is that a bid? I think a bid is still an estimate.
Or an invoice.
Invoice would probably be your final bill. This is what we've charged you. This is the work that we performed. Here's your invoice.
Yeah.
So if they've got an estimate in, then that's just a guess. But that is always editable upon. It's like no plan ever survives first contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
So if a roof is an enemy, and you're planning to build it with an estimate, when you first meet the roof for the first time, in the battlefield, the plan won't survive. This metaphor is not working. I'm trying.
No, and I would say, sometimes the estimate holds up, but there's certainly times that it doesn't.
No.
Right as contractors estimate if they don't pay.
Introduce the homeowner to appraisal. So appraisal is an option with an insurance claim. In fact, it's technically the only option for most states and most policies. Imagine a scenario. 20 years ago, there's not a contingency contract involved. You've said, I will do your work for $20,000. And then the carrier gets involved. They agree that there's damages and they don't want to pay your $20,000. The policy says if you or we disagree with the amount of loss, either party may demand appraisal. It doesn't say if you or we disagree, either party may negotiate a different settlement amount or something like that. It's implied, but it isn't specifically written. The only thing that's specifically written is this dispute resolution process of appraisal. So it is there for that reason. And it was really designed so you don't gouge the carrier because you're the one that's writing the estimate as a contractor. So they could get a couple of bids. They could get someone else to go out and give a competitive bid to see if your amount of loss is reasonable, because the policy pays for the amount that's reasonable and necessary. So they just have to determine if it's reasonable. You got to prove it's necessary. If it's reasonable and necessary, then they should just approve it. If you've actually written a real bid, that's what they do. It really is. As a PA, I've worked with contractors that did contingency contracts, and I worked with contractors that were retail contractors that every now and then had an insurance claim and just wanted us to get involved whenever they had an insurance claim because they didn't know what to do with it. With those contractors, with those particular claims, it was much easier. All I had to do was act as a PA and actually argue with policy language. Policy states that you will pay the amount that's reasonable and necessary. This is the amount that the contractors come up with to replace the roof, which was the agreed upon scope. So you tell me, is this a reasonable price? This is what they charge all the time. Here's their price sheets. Is it reasonable for them to charge what they always charge? Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
I think that contingency contractors cause a lot of these issues. So you teach contractors to work with agents pretty often, to work with them to gain more clientele. You ever had a conversation with an agent about an estimate?
Very rarely. Extremely rarely.
If you were ever to I'm going somewhere with this. I don't know how to get to the end result, so give me a second.
Okay.
If you were to have a disagreement with a carrier and you wanted to file a complaint as a policyholder, you'd either file a complaint with the Department of Insurance, maybe you file a complaint with your agent. If your complaint was they just disagree with our estimate, do you think that that would go over well?
Probably not, unless you, I mean, it's going to be, are they applying coverage the way that they're supposed to? Yes, they are. No, they're not. Coverage the way that they're supposed to, and then they're just not paying the contractor's price. The agent's really not going to go up in arms over that, I don't believe.
Have you ever seen an agent really get up in arms over stuff?
Yeah.
What do they normally go a little bit crazy about?
Denials or like major parts of the scope that are missed by the adjuster, or anything that's kind of flirting with bad faith that the adjusters are doing, just kind of representing them. Part of what we teach is like, one, get the buy-in from the agent before you're ever in a pickle. You've got a lot more leverage there. Get their commitment that they're going to take care of their clients first rather than the carrier. But aside from that, if you're working with brokers, they typically want the insurance company to take care of their customer. They want to keep their customer and keep them happy, that specific carrier, because they've got 20 of them.
Yeah. Do you like working with brokers better than traditional, what do you call it, a staff agent? You wouldn't call it a staff agent.
Captive agent.
There you go.
Yep. Typically I do.
Yeah.
Typically I think they've got a better mindset about taking care of their customers over the carrier. Although you are usually going to get kind of a mixed bag of good and bad carriers when you go to the broker. Whereas a captive carrier, you can, target just those carriers that are good carriers that are captive, which there's not a ton of them. So
as a broker, you might not have as much say in which, I feel like you'd have more say in which policies you would sell. You would only sell the policies of the carrier that's doing good for your clients mostly, right?
I mean, a lot of it, they're going to have budget. You've got your, is it okay if I just mention carriers?
Yeah.
Oh, you'll have your Safeco, Liberty Mutual, which in some places are not very good carriers. But you'll have your Nationwide, which in some places is one of the better carriers. Or you'll have your Nationwide Private Client. You'll have your Chubb. You'll have Pure. You'll have carriers like that. But you'll also have MetLife.
Okay. But if the broker needs to hit a certain price point, they're probably going to end up selling the cheaper policy.
Yeah, I mean, just depending on who the agent is. I've talked to agents that like have some of those low tier carriers and just don't sell it, like because they kind of come bundled in like a 6-pack of carriers, and they'll just not sell the ones because they know their customers are going to be unhappy and that they're going to get screwed, and so they don't even quote it.
Have you ever seen a captive agent just abandon ship and go sell a completely different one?
Yeah. I mean, like I would say most brokers started as captive agents of.
Oh, really?
State Farm, Allstate, AmFam. Those big captive agents and farmers are really good at recruiting, and they bring in fresh blood. And they'll train them up and they'll give them a base salary while they get their book of business rolling and all that sort of stuff. And so they bring a lot of people into the industry, but some of those carriers, some of the agents will stay where they're at. They'll stay at Allstate for 30 years because they're building up so much residual money. They don't want to leave. And sometimes those agents end up leaving just because they're tired of the carrier getting worse and worse at honoring their word.
You know, sometimes I think I know how much bullshit there is, and then I hear some more that happens somewhere else in the industry. I don't know much about agents. I just know that they don't like me generally, or at least they haven't in the past, just because I'm a PA. For whatever reason, they all have they've been told that public adjusters are greedy.
Sure.
I've had a lot of agents that have tried to save their clients from Matt Mulholland, the greedy public adjuster.
I've met some public adjusters that are just snakes.
There's definitely plenty of those. Just like plenty of contractors like that and plenty of adjusters like that. So it definitely happens, but to stereotype the entire trade, I guess, wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, but it happens. People get that kind of an idea all the time. Hell, I'm accused of being biased towards or against insurance adjusters fairly often. In reality, I have a lot of insurance adjuster friends because they're good adjusters, and I like keeping up with those guys. In fact, I got one coming on next week. And he actually got permission from his TPA firm to be on the show. I'm very excited about it.
Oh, nice.
I know. It's going to be great. But this guy, we don't really get in fights. He's a good guy. He tries really hard. He's a manager at this TPA firm. And we're going to get to more of these comments, questions in a second. But this is a great story. When I first met Dan, who's going to be on the show next week, we got along really well. And I don't know if it was the first meeting or the second meeting, but we were on the ground after being on the roof for like 2 minutes. And then I sent him all my photos and everything. We were just shooting the shit on the ground. And the policyholder comes out and she's like, I thought you guys were supposed to be fighting. And so I turned to Dan and I immediately went, unicorns are real. You know?
As long as they buy the roof, man, there's no reason to fight, right?
We didn't have any fights. We were talking about bullshit that had nothing to do with the claims. And that was the way the vast majority of our meetings went.
Yeah.
Good dude. But, most adjusters are like that, to be honest. Most of them. They're trying their best with what they have to work within. There are a few that are definitely shysters, complete jerks. But the vast majority of the time, they're working within their constraints. And if their constraints are set because of their estimatics, and they're the ones that have to write the estimate because there's a contingency contract. I think we've fed this demon on our side of the field by saying you get to set the price. And then when they do that, we get all mad about it.
Yeah.
If we tell them that they can set the price with our own contract with someone, and then we get mad at them for doing that, is that really a good thing? I don't think it is. I think that we've caused our own problems here.
Well, I had a situation in Denver where me and one of my buddies working for different companies had customers side by side and literally adjuster appointments one after the other. And like couldn't give you like any more crystal clear like example. He was on a contingency. And this was an adjuster, State Farm, that I would see the same guy all the time. But he goes out there and the adjuster, kind of does his thing. And it's like, okay, yeah, like I'll get you an estimate in like a week or two, and then, he's chasing that rabbit. And then I've got mine right after. He walks over, he recognizes me. He's like, hey, do you have your estimate? Yep, here it is. You want me to send you the digital too? Yep. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, and he still has to like do his due diligence and look at this house that's right next to the one he just looked at. Mm-hmm. Cause he still has to take pictures and cover his butt and all that. But it was just like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like, and he went through and, took a couple things off my estimate, but I had it that day and it was 95% paid.
There's still carriers today that don't write an estimate if you've got one. And there are some carriers that always write an estimate regardless if you have one.
Right.
So, and that really wasn't the case 20 years ago when the contingency contract really became a thing. But now that it is a thing, it's become part of their process. If you're going to teach a process to your adjusters, you're going to teach one that they're going to come across the majority of the time. The majority of the time, they're coming across a contingency. So that's what their process entails. So they deal with that kind of a thing. But yeah, so many times over the years, even as a PA writing the estimate, if I had my estimate ready, we'd go through it, line items, and there'd be times when we could come to a settlement agreement right there on the spot. I'd send them my ESX.
Yeah.
They'd have a copy of it. And certain carriers couldn't do that, and certain carriers could. And if they had to submit an estimate within a certain amount of time, the adjusters definitely appreciated that there was an ESX made, even if there was a contingency involved, and there was most of the time that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's why they got to kind of change it up a little bit. But for the most part, we at least started somewhere fairly even ground. There was a few things that need to be supplemented for.
If he's got 8 claims to go look at that day,
oh yeah,
and you can make yours the 2 easiest, the one easiest claim of the day. Cool.
Yeah.
Put it up on a silver platter, yeah. and like that contractor said, do his job for him.
You know what? There's too many contractors that actually still believe that if the adjuster writes an estimate, that sometimes the adjuster's estimate is going to be way higher than theirs. And they don't want to write an estimate because they're afraid that if they do,
they don't want to show their hand.
Isn't going to write such a high estimate.
They don't want to show their hand in that off chance that the adjuster is actually going to pay more than what they're charging.
And I have had that happen to me. But the times where it has actually happened to me, I provided an estimate up front and they said, I'm going to add a few things to this. They were going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if I had one up front. So that is a bogus argument.
And it's such a rarity anyway. If you're estimating properly, you're using their component-based estimating software and including all of the relevant components, and that their guidelines are not going to do that, then unless you screw up, there's really no way that they're going to be more, or they're going to be more.
No, it's highly unlikely. So it's just one of those excuses.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you this excuse. This is why I don't do it. It's really a shoestring argument, but it's my argument. So let me get to some of these comments. Steven says the contractor can always come up with a fixed house, $20,000 estimate, very broad estimate, one line item, fixed house. It is the adjuster asking the contractor to do something that he is not used to doing and breaking it down into square footage. So I think that he's talking about breaking things down into a component level. They want an itemized estimate from the contractor. And there are policies that do require them to break these down in an itemized estimate. Even if that was originally intended to be for personal property items, the conditions of the policy might generally say itemized or broken down item by item, and possibly even give an ASB.
There's whether you're using exactament or lump sum or whatever type of thing, I still think it's not good faith on the contractor or PA side for you to say, to not agree upon a scope, right? Yeah. To just yes, there has to be coverage for this thing. If there's not coverage for this thing, you don't owe for it. And so I can't just say fixed house, because fixed house may include things that are not covered.
I want to take the opposite argument for a second, because there are policies that say that we have to take an estimate, break it down into line items, and provide an ACV and an RCV value for those items. Should a contractor be required to determine depreciation scales? I don't think that's a contractor deal.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
No. So if the policy requires it to be broken down into ACV, and it's not just for personal property items, which some of them say, itemized, and they don't specify coverage B or coverage C items, then maybe an adjuster does need to get involved, and definitely for those claims. But if a proof of loss is required, and the proof of loss requires you to break it down into ACV as well, should a contractor write that? So take the opposite side here. We've been saying so far that the contractor needs to write the estimate. Now I submit that The contractor has to determine what the ACV value of something is. They're not qualified to do that. So an adjuster has to write the estimate.
How often do you run into that? I don't know that I've ever run into that
You'd
personally.
be surprised. A lot of policies do require you to break down ACV and RCV in a proof of loss. Now, the proof of loss might say upon our request, meaning that it's not required to use a proof of loss form. But I think that it's a good idea to do a proof of loss on all of them anyway, because it triggers certain parts of the policy that you otherwise don't trigger. I'm going to come back to your comment in a second, Stephen. I'll bring it back up. But if the policy does require this, and many of them do, if there's a proof of loss that's going to be submitted in order to kick in some of those triggers, such as the loss payment provision, we will pay within 60 days after a proof of loss is received or submitted, and an agreement is made, or appraisal award is submitted. And there might be a few other items on that. That might be a little bit longer, but generally speaking, that's the loss payment provision in a nutshell. We will pay within this amount of time after a proof of loss. A proof of loss is the first thing on that list, regardless of whether or not it was requested. If you submit it, it kicks in that 60-day time frame trigger.
Right.
So in certain states where there isn't any time frame set, such as Georgia, where there's just no regulation on the amount of time something should take, if I don't do a proof of loss, then I never get to set a specific time frame for the carrier to perform any kind of an action within. So by doing that, I can. And in maybe 50% of the policies, maybe 40% of the policies, it will require the items be broken down by ACV and RCV. And if you are going to make a claim for ACV and then later on change it to RCV, then you're going to have to be able to break it down as well. Who is supposed to do that? The policies don't always say how to do it. Let me say it this way. There's 3 different ways to decide how much the ACV of something is. There's either the replacement cost minus depreciation method that most states abide by, the broad evidence rule, where it's just if you can come up with some kind of reasoning behind it broadly with some evidence, then you could go for it. And then there is the fair market value. So certain states apply it different ways. Most states are going to be under the first one, and most policies are going to be under the first one. So replacement cost minus depreciation. Depreciation is based on age and condition. How the hell are you supposed to figure out how that even applies? Depreciated based on age and condition that's clear as mud.
Yeah.
Can you depreciate your wedding ring based on age and condition?
According to them, I guess.
I don't think a contractor or even a policyholder would really be able to do that. So this is all based off of, the benefits of a policy that weren't originally written into policies. Policies used to be ACV only. And now this RCV stuff that's been around for many years now, but it is still relatively newer. And we're being asked to depreciate things in order to allow the carrier to have a bifurcated payment so that they can pay out only the depreciated value first. But I don't think a contractor should be the one that's depreciating that. Mostly because we're talking about agreeing to an amount that is a fiduciary responsibility of the policy for the policyholder. If anybody has a different opinion, let me know. So now we're to the point again. So if that is required, should the contractor write that estimate or the adjuster?
Yeah, in the absence of a PA, I would say I think the scope still, the contractor should be writing a scope for the work that they believe needs to be done. Now, the adjuster may be able to say, hey, these things in your scope are not covered, right? Because the contractor can't apply that, can't discern that coverage necessarily. But I don't think the contractor is really in the right place to apply depreciation. Even if you could take a good stab at it because you've got experience, like you said, that's a fiduciary duty that they're not licensed to.
They're not.
To do.
But a PA isn't licensed to perform the work. So are they appropriate? An adjuster isn't licensed to do the work. I think that there's a conundrum there. There's a little bit of a pickle. There needs to be a mix here. So it's one or the other. But can it be both?
The end answer: hire a PA.
Maybe not well. If the it's either a public adjuster or an insurance adjuster. The insurance adjuster can work hand in hand with a contractor as well. It doesn't have to be a PA.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a PA. I'm biased towards that.
Yeah.
But
right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be. If the insurance adjuster can apply the depreciation to the contractor's estimate, I suppose. But you could only take in their estimate and do that easily if they're both using Xactimate. And I don't think contractors should be using Xactimate. So Savage makes a very valid point here. Probably the most reasonable thing I've read in a long time.
Yeah.
PAs who look like Indiana Jones with a beard and glasses are underappreciated in our society. And I think that's very, very true. P.S. We all miss Remington. Where's he gone? Remington is on vacation. He does that a lot. I think it's a thing that attorneys do. Maybe it's just him. He is an avid hunter with his family, and they take fun trips to go hunting for weird things. And his photos are amazing. If you happen to be a hunter, reach out to him. He's got some great pictures. One day I'll go hunting with him probably. We've talked about it a lot. And then, life.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, you know what's coming up 2 weeks from tomorrow?
I do. There's a guy named Matt who's coming to my facility at NCI, and he's going to do a whole workshop on working with agents to get more business.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And
I'm getting pretty excited about it.
That guy's like near genius.
Only when I'm standing near you, Matt.
Well, okay. Fair enough. I do glow genius.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited about it.
So the restoration referral workshop, if any of you guys are in the industry, and PAs go to this thing too, don't they?
I don't have any PAs signed up for that boot camp, but they could. I do have some PAs that are clients that are getting business from insurance agents, as crazy as that sounds.
I believe it, even though the insurance agents tend to be a little bit biased against them.
It's going to be fewer agents that are willing to refer business to a PA than are willing to refer business to a contractor.
I think it's worth a shot. I'm excited about hosting that event for you guys. I've been a fan of what you do for a while. You definitely take a stance of integrity there by involving someone that normally contractors might or public adjusters might talk a bunch of shit about. And you're involving someone like that to gain business and helping them in the process. I think it's a very good thing, and it makes sense. It's so simple, but you really break it down to make it easy. I think the public adjuster should do the same thing. I know of one PA that's going to be there.
Yeah, you can. It can be a beautiful thing if done correctly. If not, it can be kind of toxic, like you see with MRPs or just with contractors that don't get to reap those benefits.
It's true. So Stephen, who is a fairly intelligent PA, even though he looks like a musclehead contractor. I imagine Stephen has a really tall lifted truck. I don't know for sure, but I'm picturing him driving a very tall truck with lights on the bottom.
I've heard this argument too. So this is something we didn't really talk about. We talked about
to keep us on track.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that the contractor doesn't want to write the estimate first, just in case the adjuster's estimate's higher, right?
Stephen's got somewhat of a point here.
But yeah, the chess move here is basically saying, hey, they may deny the entire claim because I included maybe we have to replace all the siding because of something, and they didn't see that. They were going to replace, they were going to replace a part of the siding or just the roof or something. Now they're going to deny the whole thing. Well,
I mean, if we're waiting for their estimate as a affirmation of coverage, I mean, that's definitely something different from just waiting for their estimate and never writing your own because you want to start from theirs only.
I would
But
say
there is a good point here.
There is, and at the same time, I'm not sure that there is. So let me
I'll give you some examples.
So let's talk about this example. There is a claim here that maybe the siding, they didn't see the dimples in the aluminum siding, and there's asbestos underneath it, and and it's going to get real expensive real quick. They didn't even see this damage. They bought the roof. And they admitted there was a hailstorm on this day and we owe for it. Cool. They bought the roof, they opened coverage, and now you get to present the evidence. Here's all the siding. Here's the dimples in it with a flashlight. And here's what's underneath. Here's the price. And now they're on the hook. I get that. But if you play it the other way and you say, okay, I'm going to write my estimate for the roof, for the siding, for the asbestos, for everything right up front, the facts of the property are still exactly the same. And so the carrier either owes or they don't. And if they play the chess move of saying, I'm not going to pay it, we're going to deny that this hail hit on this date, we still have every bit the resources to substantiate our claim.
If I think that this goes along the lines of just making an assumption that the carrier is going to act inappropriately. If you assume that they're going to act inappropriately if they can, then writing this large estimate is going to make it more likely that they do so. And handing that to them up front would make it more likely. And public adjusters across the nation are all screaming at their screens right now saying they definitely act inappropriately sometimes. And it's true. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So if you were to present the entire thing instead of waiting until coverage is opened, then they could deny those claims. Now, I'll give you an alternative. And this is happening lately. This is a kind of a newer defense from the carriers that seems to be rather inappropriate anyway. But if they open coverage and then you submit a large estimate, they might then send out an engineer and have that engineer say, well, wait a minute, it's not actually damaged by hail or wind or whatever. And now the carrier is going to come back and say, it turns out we should never have paid for this claim to begin with. We're not going to take the money back that we've already paid you, but we're not going to pay you anymore.
RCV. Yeah.
So they're actually they're still taking coverage away that they already affirmed, but they're not taking the money back. So you feel like that might still be okay. And it's not. It's still not okay. They've still removed coverage that they've already affirmed. It's still an estoppel-like situation. Now, I'm not an attorney. Sure sounds like an estoppel-like situation to me. Talked to a few attorneys at the last event that I went to that's actually picking up that very argument and going forward with it on some cases. They've got this as a part of it. And we'll see how that comes out the other end. But if that's what they're going to do, then they're going to do it either way. If they're going to send an engineer out and say that there's no damage after all, that we were wrong, that we're not going to pay anymore, they were probably going to do that either way. So to your point, it might be okay to just make the entire claim up front now. But there's definitely situations where it's multi-millions of dollars. And if you were to send an estimate in for the multi-million dollars, they're probably going to want to spend the money they can to put the defense together immediately. If you wait until coverage is opened, it's much harder for them to remove it. It's easier for them to deny up front all at once than to deny it later on after they've already opened coverage. So if there is a situation where it's better strategically to let them open coverage first, go for it. I've definitely gone down those paths, especially in the really large claims, because they can save a lot of money if they just deny the whole thing. If they can find a reason for them to deny it, they could save a ton of money. Most of the policyholders are going to give up and not go all the way to litigation. So they might not ever end up having to pay it. If you write a detailed exact estimate with legitimate line items and a carrier responsibility comes back saying your pricing doesn't align with theirs, So they aren't adjusting their price. What is the best way to overcome this objection? So if it's a difference of price, it's an appraisal situation.
There you go.
It's so weird. Depending on what state you're in, you say the
He's
word
in
appraisal.
Tennessee, by the way.
You say the word appraisal, and depending on what state you're in, either everybody's like, yeah, just send it to appraisal, it's fine. Or they're like, oh, why would you ever send anything to appraisal? You know, certain states, they use appraisal against you. In certain states, they withhold appraisal from you. And it's the ones that you can't have it that you want it more, and the ones that you have it on everything you don't want to do it anymore that you don't want it.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting.
So you brought up a point about engineers being used to kind of roll back that coverage. It seems like there's a lot that I don't understand about engineers. How would one kind of figure out, how would someone learn about how to navigate that situation, Matt? Is there any kind of resource or?
I feel like I really need to pay you for that question right now.
Just gonna alley-oop that.
That was the best softball ever. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, at the National Claims Institute, we have a class. It's 1 day long, and we're taking it on tour. It's called Dealing with Engineers. We're actually teaching it this Thursday at our facility in New Smyrna Beach. We've done it in Dallas, Texas, and we're doing it in either Atlanta or Nashville next. But it's 1 day long, and we talk about exactly what you need to do if there's an engineer involved, what to do before the engineer goes out there, what information you need to present to the engineers, what information you need the adjuster to ask the engineer to do. We get into the motivations of the engineers, the defenses that the carriers come up with surrounding those engineers, so you know exactly where they're going with something, so you can avoid it completely by providing the information up front.
I saw some cool stuff from the APA kind of about that.
Yeah, the APA has some great information on their website, apassociation.org. I think that's their website. Anyway, yeah, they're one of our sponsors for the class. And we do go into
Makes
some of the
sense.
stuff that they've already presented on their website. We go a lot further, obviously, because I can't stay surface level. It's just not in me. I like to dig into things. But it's a great class. And the people that have taken it so far, I got some great feedback from one PA at the Policyholder Preservation of America conference last week. He told me that he took that class, put it into his CRM as a workflow, and has won 2 claims already as a result of taking that class that he doesn't know if he would have won otherwise. And there's no way for us to know, but he's attributing those wins to the class. And I think that was cool.
Sweet.
So I know it's semantics, but would saying here is a scope of work versus here is our estimate change the dynamic at all? Well, if you took the pricing off of the estimate and called it a scope of work, then you're just negotiating whether or not there's a scope of work. So if you're a PA, as a PA writing an estimate, I often go down this path. I don't know if I would do that as a contractor. You have to tell me, Matt, if you would do that as a contractor. As a PA, if I'm writing the estimate, though, I would call it the scope of work, and I would still say, listen, so we've agreed to the scope of work. If this dollar amount doesn't work for the contractor, they're not able to do the work at that price, then I'll come back to you and I'll let you know. And that's where we would leave it most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think a scope of work is a good place to start. Let's make sure we're talking about the same project here, and then we can figure out the price. But if we're not talking about the same project, if I'm talking about, hey, we also have to do the detached garage and they don't have coverage for that, then we need to get that worked out, as opposed to just saying, no, you have to pay me for it. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair to attack the scope of work first and then attach pricing to it, whether it's Xactimate pricing or the contractor's own.
Let me bring this point up, and no one's asked this, but I know it's a question on most of your minds, being my audience. So how can the pricing list change? There are a lot of carriers that say that they don't change their price list. Let me tell you how this actually works, and in the policy language, right? When they pay out the ACV amount, the ACV is based on the RCV at the time of loss, RCV minus depreciation at the time of loss. But when they pay out the RCV benefits, RCV is based on the amount that is reasonably necessarily incurred, not the amount that the replacement cost would have been at the time of loss. It's the amount incurred or spent. So if you wait 60 days to perform the work and the pricing of the materials goes up, it's the amount you reasonably necessarily incurred. So your RCV can go up. The price list can change with the months that go along. I know that's very pertinent for a lot of the information that's out there right now. The ACV is always going to be based off of the RCV at the time of loss minus depreciation. But the RCV amount that is actually incurred is going to happen after the fact. They can change that price list. Don't let them tell you they can't. Of course they can. Sometimes they just don't know how. I walked a lot of adjusters through the process of changing the price list, and they've done it just because I taught them how to do it. And that really was the only issue that they had. They'd say, I can't do that. And really what they mean is, I can't because I don't know how. Not that I'm not allowed to. Keep that in mind. I hope that helps some people. Oh, I just scrolled and suddenly there's like 50 comments. It did not update on my end until just now. Holy shit. Dude, Safeco sucks. I have a large loss that Safeco is neglecting. 3 months, no response. Desk adjusters line goes to voicemail directly every time. That's a problem.
I'd find out who that adjuster's boss is, and then who his boss
I'd be calling
is.
800 numbers and definitely talking about unnecessary delays. I don't know what state you're in, but delays, depending on your state, become more and more important. But you've been doing this a while, man. I feel like you know where to go with that. Javier, what if we can get into it? They say they'll pay for the roof for loss, but only Xactimate price. Even though Xactimate states pricing needs to be modified per user conditions, they won't even pay for the flashings, manufacturer specs, codes, discontinued materials, etc. So how can you argue with stupid? Well, if you're allowing them to set the price with a contingency contract, then they're going to set the price how they want to. If this is the pricing structure they use for the work, and you're going to do it for the amount they approve, it can't be a contingency, guys. I'm hoping this episode, everybody thinks walking away from this, I got to stop doing the contingency stuff. Stephen, in many cases, both linear foot and square foot is not mentioned on their estimates, although Xactimate is becoming more and more popular among contractors. It's absolutely not to be considered the standard. No, it's not a standard. There's no such thing as a standard estimating platform. There are estimating platforms. There's no standard. A standard is a very different thing when you're talking about insurance. All right. The IICRC S500 is a standard. How to dry things. An estimating platform is a software. It's not a standard. John Wood made a great point about that on Jack's podcast. I think he said that it was a violation of Sherman's Law, something of that nature, price setting. I missed what he was saying.
John Wood's a smart guy.
He is a smart guy. I adjusters tend to write estimates to the benefit thief employer. Am I wrong? They have guidelines that they're supposed to abide by. If you were told you can write estimates, but here's the things on how you write it, or you lose your job, how would you do it? Right? So they write it to the benefit of their employer. Sure, they write it. Any estimate they write is not to the benefit of their employer because it's a payout.
Well, so I mean, think about it this way. If you're working for a contractor, you're their estimator for a contractor, they're going to have guidelines for you to make sure that the job is profitable.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
Say,
they're making sure they've got guidelines to make sure that their business is profitable.
If you're allowing them to set the price. My insurance company negotiated with my contractor, said they agreed to settlement with him. He's not a public adjuster, and insurance never discussed this with me. Wow.
Oh, please.
Interesting. Now, Susan, I know you're a contractor, though, aren't you? I've had 7 adjusters. I think she's a contractor. She's talked on this show a few times. I assumed she was a contractor anyway.
It sounds like not, based on her.
If they negotiate with your contractor, then there's absolutely no reason for the contractor to have agreed to a settlement on your behalf if you didn't tell them to. But even then, that might not be legal in your state. It depends on the state. You need to talk to an attorney in that kind of a situation. You could get did they pay the contractor directly or did the money come to you? Because if the money still came to you, then you still have the ability to pay out as work is completed or something to verify that there's going to be workmanship.
I think, and this may not be the case with her, but I have seen where a contractor, again, here's a case against the contingency agreement, is they sign a contingency agreement. Maybe the adjuster already wrote a scope for $12,000. And they've got that contingency agreement in the customer's mind. This is $12,000, and then the contractor goes out and supplements it to 17, and then the customer goes, "Hey, you said you were going to do this work for 12,000. That $5,000 is mine."
Because your contract clearly stated that you were going to do it for the amount the insurance company approved, and that's what they approved.
That's what they approved, yeah. And so now that extra money, it belongs to me, or air quotes for extra. Yeah.
For extra verisimilitude, air quotes. Pa-pa. That's true. They're only working within their constraints because they'll give coverage or up to where they won't get called out to approve the loss. So if a IA is working within their constraints, and they are constrained, if they're working as much as they can within those constraints to approve the loss, then they're a decent IA. And that's what most of them are. The vast majority are truly doing what they can. Some of them are very jaded. Whole contingency contracts were for people who weren't able to sell. That's entirely possible. Insurance settlements for contents said they agree with my contractor. Okay.
Ruh-roh.
Now you have a problem with your insurance carrier. All right. If they're saying they agree with your contractor and they're refusing to talk to you about the value of your contents, then there's a severe problem there between you and the carrier. And I assume you asked the contractor at that point why they agreed to certain numbers on contents. Because why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. Did you hire them to replace your stuff? You can do that. You can hire people to replace your stuff, and their charges would be covered as part of the replacement cost if you have a replacement cost for your stuff. Just saying. Yes, there are a lot of fair and good IA, and most of the time they appreciate it if you have a fair, reasonable estimate ready and offer the SX. Luciana. MZA. Do you think MZA is her last name?
Z. Unlikely.
Z. Luciana. Z. That's hard to do. Frederick, it's your claim. No one can settle on your behalf. Wait a minute. Your claim. No one can settle on your behalf. He's answering Susan.
Yeah.
She said field adjuster not able to give them out for approval. We're going to skip past.
There may be an AOB type situation, or there's all sorts of different situations that could be happening there.
I'm sure there's definitely a lot of missing information there. Adjusters do commonly pay for things that I have never dreamed of asking for. So why would I not want them to do that? What? Well, are you saying that they won't offer you those things if you write an estimate? I don't know, Stephen. I've had a completely different experience than you, it seems like. I've written estimates, and the adjusters that write things I've never dreamed of, because I'm friendly with them, because I'm not an asshole or something. I'm not saying that you are, because I don't know how you deal with claims, but we tend to have a very transparent conversation about stuff. And they'll say, listen, you should be asking for this. You should be asking for this. And they'll eagerly tell me the things that I'm missing on my estimate so that I can continue to get those on other estimates, not just on theirs. Because we're friendly with each other. We're giving each other's pointers and advice. And I've had plenty of adjusters that I've handed an estimate to, and they've told me to add things because of the relationship with them. Now, if I'm a complete asshole to them right away, I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying that you do that. I honestly have no idea how Stephen deals with claims. I know that he's a smart man, though, so there might be something more there. When the IA, Neil says, when the IA file review kicks in, it will be interesting. That's exactly how we used to get many approved and denied. More denials nowadays when it went more than they wanted. When we used to share our ESX files. Things are definitely getting tougher. There's no question around that. Stephen asked us to define itemized, and there is a case in Georgia that we talked about earlier where the word itemized item wasn't defined, and the whole case was around the fact that it wasn't defined. It's not defined in policy, so go to Webster's dictionary. That's what that court did, and it could be interpreted broadly or narrowly, and it's going to be based on your jurisdiction more than anything else. Possibly there's some case law in your area, possibly there's some statutes, or possibly the language in the policy just doesn't quite add up. If the estimate is prepared in conjunction with the contractor, most of the time it's a straightforward negotiation with the desk examiner. Luciana has said all that. You guys keep writing comments. This is going to be a while. We got so behind on comments, man.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can actually find a valid question here and stop just going through the comments. PAs have to be sure that contractors qualified to write a legitimate estimate. An example would be a typical remodeler doing a large fire loss estimate. Would a remodeler be good for a large fire loss? I guess if you're removing everything first, remodelers do remove and replace with new stuff, right? You ever been a remodeler, Matt?
Yeah.
You ever done
Featured
a fire
on
loss?
HGTV.
The funny thing about fire that I find, everybody wants to try to get rid of smoke smell using some kind of a sand blast or soda blasting or something along those lines. But you ignore some certain things. If you're going in an attic and you're soda blasting studs, it's because it got really hot and there's smoke has penetrated into the wood fibers and it smells terrible. If it got over 250 degrees in that attic, all the nails or the gusset plates have been compromised. Go down that path. Yeah. Metallurgy 101. Have some fun with that one. Very often in Florida, you're required to provide ACV breakdown. That's so very often. So she's right. So this is one of those issues. So if you do have to provide that and you're a contractor writing an estimate, that's hard to do. Xactimate does have that built in, but if you're not using Xactimate, I don't think a contractor should. It doesn't make sense. There's some hand holding needs to be done between adjusters and roofers. Do you think an agent could determine depreciation for a contractor?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, not any more than a random person off the street.
Oh, see if I can find a question in here.
June 20 through 23rd.
Is that when your class is?
No, mine's the 8th through the 10th. Mine's the 8th through the 10th. Maybe he's asking about your engineer deal.
So, I'm going to have to pull up my calendar real quick. Give me 2 seconds. We're going to have to wrap this one up too. June 20 through 23rd. 20th through the 22nd, I've got a Florida Public Adjuster Masterclass. The 23rd and the 24th, I've got dealing with engineers. I'm not sure which order it's in, but one of them is Atlanta and the other one is Nashville. That's the 23rd and the 24th. How do I tell the insurance adjuster they have no right to have contractor accept my content settlement? Just like that. You did it.
Well, she didn't. She needs to send that to them, but
yeah. I mean, if you sent that to them and they said, we don't care, you've got some other issues.
Yeah, call an attorney. At that point. My guess is that could get sorted out without an attorney, but there's got to be some communication happening there. Maybe. We
don't have to assume the crew are acting appropriately, but they typically are almost clueless when it comes to the actual restoration, material takeoffs, delivery, build, warranty. APAssociation.org was the APA. I had the website correct. Thanks, Sarah. and my wife. Thank you, Ashley. Need the engineer class in Indianapolis, please, sir. Let NCI grace us.
Nashville's not that far from Indy.
Is it
It's
not?
a little drive.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
it's a
Yeah.
drive.
There are certain
It's
cities I
doable.
want to get to. I want to go to Nashville and Atlanta because I told them I would. We're going to do Chicago. We're going to do Denver. We're going to do someplace in Minnesota. Just because Sarah is telling me I have to go to Minnesota.
Do they have claims going on up there lately?
Yeah. I want to go into Iowa too, though. I don't know how many times engineers are dealing with some of those Iowa derecho and there's some a haboob. Do you know what a haboob is?
No.
Ah, shit, now I forget what a haboob is. Liam, what's a haboob? I don't remember. My son is a live studio audience today. He had this conversation with a guy out of Iowa. We were talking about it. I have no idea what a haboob is now suddenly. Yeah, brain fart. Whatever. We'll come back. The next episode, we'll be talking about haboobs. It's not a sexual thing. All right.
It's a disaster is a type of intense dust storm carried on an atmospheric gravity current.
So apparently the Dust Bowl from the 20s was a haboob.
No kidding.
Right. So now there's a haboob and it's killing crops and stuff out in Iowa. They're getting all the cool stuff.
Jeez.
All the cool PAs.
Did you go out to Iowa with the derecho?
I never made it out there. I want to.
Man, it was I was in Cedar Rapids not long after it hit, and it boggled my mind how many humongous trees were out there. And I mean, that's probably why they've got these haboobs now, is because it knocked down all the trees that were keeping the wind and the dust and stuff down.
Yeah. Now there would be a lot of erosion as a result of the lack of root systems holding it in place. That's actually a good point. That makes sense.
It's a derecho climb.
Yeah. Haboob. Derecho. They get all the storms that are very hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
Although haboob isn't hard to pronounce. It's a lot of fun to pronounce, actually.
And on that note,
I think we should end this thing.
Let's do it, man.
We're only 12 minutes over. We did good. Hey, if I didn't get to your comment, I'm very sorry. There are comments that I literally just really appreciate in the participation in this. It means a lot to me that you guys are willing to stick through these things. Sometimes I like just talk nonsense. Everybody seems to get a lot out of this thing, so I really appreciate it. If you would like to help support the channel, listentothisbull.com does have t-shirts available. I don't have one of those on right now. I meant to have one on before the show, but we got a lot of t-shirts available for sale right on our website, listentothisbull.com. You can also access all of the older podcasts there as well. And you can even make a donation if you really feel up to it. The second week of June, Matt Danskin is hosting his restoration referral workshop at our facilities at the National Claims Institute in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. You should go to a website for that. And that website is
roofingbootcamp.com.
roofingbootcamp.com. And if you want to go to the Dealing with Engineers class we were talking about in Florida, that is this Thursday. It's 2 days from now. And it's cheap. I think it's like, I think it's normally $750, but I think we're selling it for $500 right now. Might even be less than that. I don't even really know. But if you're interested in that course, reach out to me or Jordana, or post something somewhere saying you're interested, and I'll get with you immediately upon that. It's in 2 days. It's a 1-day course, and it's a pretty impactful course. I'll be honest. That one's one of the better ones that I've built. So, and Matt Danskin with his workshop, I've heard a ridiculous amount of good things about, which is why I wanted his class to be the very first thing that we ever hosted. The first time we host something, you'll get to partake of our bar and have something better than Silver Bullet. That'll be great.
Looking forward to it, man.
All right, cool. So I'm going to end the broadcast, but it's going to take several seconds. And I think you should make a weird pose while we do it.